Good evening, folks. I suppose it's an area, first of all, the skill development. It's an area that I would have a huge interest in from what does skill development mean for, I suppose, an under-7 player, and what does a skill development mean for a senior player. And I suppose tonight's presentation is going to be looking at what is the appropriate things that we should be doing as coaches, because I'm no different than any of you. I'm learning on the job. I'm making mistakes. I'm passionate enough that I probably do a good bit of reading on it and so on like that. And I'll follow anyone to get any idea from any sport. And I think that's one of the key things that we need to be is sponges to take information from everywhere and then try what works and what doesn't work. So tonight's session, I suppose, I'm going to make it as interesting as possible. You'll see that there's a few coaching videos, actually videos where I'll be showing what I've just explained. So I hope that helps. All right. Again, just for you, if you think I'm going to reinvent the wheel here tonight, I'm afraid I'm not. But what I'm hoping to do is that I've tied a lot of information from a lot of different backgrounds, from different sports, and so on, and I've tried to apply them to hurling. So it's a very practical presentation tonight. As Dara says, anyone has any questions, don't be afraid to put them into the chat, and we'll have a look at them at the end, okay? So Dara, if you can go on then, please. Okay, so we're just going to have a look at this first there, folks.
Bravo. Mi sa dire l'ora, per favore?
5:35.
Ma sicuro?
36.
Grazie.
Prego.
Ha mangiato il ciuchino, eh?
No,
Senta, mi sa dire che ore sono adesso?
ancora. 7:15.
Ma sono le 7:15 spaccate. Incredibile. Ma lei come fa? A leggere l'ora nelle palle del ciuchino, scusa.
No, io mi alzo. Sotto c'è il campanile, vedi? Già vedi? 7:15.
Okay, folks, just I suppose the idea of that one is it's not always the obvious, okay, when we're coaching, especially with skill acquisition. What you see, it's not just the outcome that we're looking at, it's the process that we should be very interested in. And I think that's we're going to sort of look at the difference in the roles of parents versus coaches. And you have a parent on the line, if the ball hits the back of the net, they're jumping up and down, they're delighted. From a coaching point of view, maybe the technique wasn't right and so on like that. And that's what we have to be looking at. We have to look more than just what the obvious thing is, okay? So if you roll on there, Dara, please. Okay, so parents outcome focus hugely. Okay, end result is everything. Did you win? Did you lose? How many times did you go home in the evening as a young lad when you were hurling yourself and the first thing you were asked, did you win? Next thing was, did you score? Okay, and those are, so you could be after winning, but you mightn't have scored, but you might have felt you had a good game. Well, it didn't matter when you went in. And it wasn't out of any badness. It was just out of, that's what happened. And I think the idea now we're trying to get around to the thing is, well, had you fun? How did you get on? Did you enjoy it? Did you play your hardest? And they'd be the kind of questions that I would have trained myself to ask my own son, okay? With parents as well, one child matters. And that's very different from us as coaches. With us as coaches, we're very much focused on the process. Well, what was the technique like? Granted, they got a goal, but what was the technique right? Maybe you've done everything right and the ball just tailed off wide in the end. Well, then you don't nail that. The technique could have been good, and that's hugely important. And that gives a player confidence to go make mistakes because you're looking at the bigger picture. You're not looking just at the outcome the whole time. You don't have, I suppose, the luxury of focusing on one individual as a coach. And we'll be talking about that as we go on in the presentation. So I just want you to keep that in mind, whether you're a parent or a coach. There's probably two different perspectives. And the idea is, I suppose, to get more of our parents, especially of underage kids, all the way up along, to be thinking of the team and not just be thinking of their own, okay? And that can be harder at times, because sometimes that message or that mindset that those parents have can be transmitted to their own son, their own daughter when playing the sport, and that can make life that little bit more difficult for the coach. Okay, the coach is looking. I know with us in Rathnure, we're looking at say with our under sevens, we're looking at what will they be like at under 17. If we don't win a match up till that, of course we're going to try, but we're going to look to have a full skill set when they get to 17 and be competitive at minor premier. That's our aim. That's our aim. It's a 10-year aim. It's not to go down to a blitz at the weekend, where a lot of the parents are, we go and play a local team, they want to beat them. All right. So it's just to keep that in mind. And if you communicate that early and often with your coach, with your parents as the coach, if you communicate that, it sort of takes pressure off me as a coach, that I don't have to be worrying about winning every blitz, every game I play. I just have to be worrying about, are the kids having fun? Are they developing? Are they doing the thing right? Okay. All right. Moving on then, Dara. Okay, so just for this one, lads, there was like up on the front of it there, and asked you to get 2 tennis balls or 2 slitters. It doesn't really matter, even if you have 2 pairs of socks rolled up, it doesn't matter. What we're looking at tonight, we're looking at learning skills. So just to get a little bit of a mindset of us learning a new skill, we're going to teach you something new. Okay, so all I want you to do is stand away from a wall, fire the ball against the wall and catch them when they come back. So everybody up and do that, please. I'll give it a few seconds to move on, okay? So you're just throwing the ball against the wall and you're catching them as they come back. 2 balls at the one time, all right? Now, if you have mastered that, I want you to rotate. So when you're catching in alternate hands. So you're throwing the ball, you throw with your left hand, you're catching in the right, and vice versa, okay? A good step up in difficulty, okay? Okay, go again then. Next one then. Can you put a clap in behind your back before you catch the ball? So when you throw, catching alternately and clapping. Right, the key thing here, the great thing here is I don't get to see you making a bags of it, okay? I'm sure some of us are, and it's great. Why? Because it doesn't matter. Well, that's how our coaching sessions should be. It shouldn't matter when kids are making a mistake. You should have that environment created that mistakes are part of learning. And that's just one little point from this task. Next one then. Finally, throw it up, do a jumping jack, clap your hands at the back and do it. I don't think many will get that. Okay, I don't think many will get that. All right? Just give it a go. Okay, and finally then, you can sit back down, you can sit. We're not going to bother doing it for the minute because I don't think we'll get it. Okay, the biggest coaching questions, or the most underused coaching questions, are coming up next. So next, just, Dara, yeah. So discuss what just happened under the following 3 points. All right, Dara, yeah. So how did it feel? For you as a player, how did that feel? All right. What feedback was given, or was it given by anybody? Well, nobody was actually telling you what to do, probably. What demonstration did you get? You got 0 demonstration. So you were totally on your own. You had no feedback. So it was up to you yourself. And it just shows how much more difficult it is to learn a task when you're not given feedback and you have no demonstration given. So for any of us, we might think just not a whole lot happened there. But the sciencey bit, a huge amount actually happened there. So if you go on then, Dara. Okay, so when players learn new skills, this is your inter-county senior hurlers. When they're learning new skills, this is also your under 6s, your under 8s. It doesn't matter. All right, the brain, or the central processing unit of the body, which is the brain, seeks 4 different types of information. Number 1, the condition of the environment and the position of the athlete. I can guarantee you no 2 of you that stood up to do that activity was standing in the same position. No 2 of you were probably the exact distance, same distance from the wall. All right. So what you did first, you took on board, right? How far do I think I need to stand? So you thought about that. You probably didn't think of it, right? Step 1 now, how far, but that actually happened. The next thing you thought about, you probably done it through a few dummy throws with the hands just going like that to get the movement right, okay? So that is showing the brain is sussing out what's the demands of the movement that's going to be performed, all right? When you started throwing then, your brain sought the idea of what are the consequences as perceived by the senses during and after the movement. So if you were throwing and they were coming back and you were just catching and throwing like that, well, you said, let's keep going like that. But if you're having to reach out here or reach out there or step back, well, also that's been taken on board by the brain. And the brain says, right, let's adjust our throw so we don't have to do that. And then the final one is a comparison of the actual outcome, what happened, versus your intended outcome. And this is these 4 points can't be understated for us as coaches, because when we see a kid performing something, if we're dealing in processes, we see what they do, we have good practice in our own head, and we try to make a relationship between both. Right? How do I get what's actually happening in reality into what is ideal practice? And that is what coaching is getting that information, first being aware of what are they doing, what should they be doing, how can I get them from what they're doing to what they should be doing? And that's the key for us as coaching. And communication skill comes hugely into that, and knowing your players, okay? So that's absolutely massive. Now, and the implications for us as a coach, we think there's nothing happening. But if we go on to the next slide then, Dara. Right, so the big thing, as I mentioned, it's a hugely complex set of events that's after shown off. So how could we help as coaches? So the first thing we do is we can show empathy. In other words, we can relate to the person, to the player that's not been able to perform the skill. All right, and that's why it's very important that we ourselves are putting ourselves out of a comfort zone, and maybe that little bit vulnerable now and again, that we can have that empathy so we can pass it on to a child, okay? We also need to be realistic. If I start a new skill with the under 7s or the under 9s in Rathnure, there's a good chance most of them will be doing it for the very first time. Some of them will be well able to do it, others won't. I have to be realistic. If I expect 3 nights, come out of the field and they all can do it, I'm cutting myself. Be realistic. The next one, be prepared for differences. It's one of the most brilliant things about us as people. We're all different. We're all different. I can already see at under 7 level, you can see in your mind's eye what type of players loads of these lads are going to be. And it's brilliant that you can help that. You can help develop that. You can help them with their weaknesses. But you have to be prepared for they're all going to be different. They're going to learn at different levels. They're going to mature at different levels. But the great thing about it, as I said earlier, we're doing this as a 10-year project. We're not doing it to win an under 10 game. It's not the interest. It's not our interest at all. It's that can we keep as many of these lads to minor premier as possible? If we can keep our full panel to that, we are a success at the same time that they've learned stuff. Okay? Remember, LTPD, long-term player path or player development. It's not a quick fix. So it takes the pressure off me of having to get these players, these 7, 8, 9s, 10s, over the line in a few years. It's not. I have 10 years to work. The club is 10 years, and we need to do that. Next one then is plan for individuality. When you're doing your training session, do you remember the fella then that's left-handed, the 3 that are left-handed? Have you planned to demonstrate, which is one of the key parts of coaching a skill, left-handed, or got a left-handed hurler out of the club to come in and do it? So know your players, which is the next point, but plan for individuality. The last one then is know their circumstances. You might say to lads, I want you all to practice at home. Maybe issues are going on at home and it's not possible for them to do. Maybe they don't have the space, whatever it is. So try to get to know your kids' circumstances. So going back to the other side there with the diagram, the complex process of skill acquisition. How can a club help? Okay, so prior learning is the key to learning skills. In other words, how does a 15-year-old pick up skills maybe quicker than another 15-year-old? Well, it can have a lot to do with what they've done as children. They're outside the whole time. They're hurling, they're footballing, they're soccer, they're basketball, and they're cycling, all these other sports. So they're mixing, they're sampling rather than early specialization. Another area that helps is the nurseries that we have in the clubs at the moment. Rathnure have an active start club, so from 2 to about 6 to come to that. After that, it's under 7 hurling and under 7 camogie or under 6 camogie, okay? So good coaching from us. A lot of times you hear, that's someone, what team are you involved in? I'm only with the under sixes. You're not only with, you're at the foundation level of the club, and you probably have the greatest role to play in that club, okay? So it's hugely important that we're aware of that. Okay, moving on then, Dara. Okay, so just what we did there with the ball against the wall, the 3 stages of learning. When you're learning an activity or a skill or whatever it is, you go through 3 distinct stages. The first stage is known as the mental stage. The characteristics of a mental stage, of somebody performing a skill in a mental stage, is huge amount of errors. So if you're expecting players to start a new activity, let it be seniors, doesn't matter, a new activity or a new skill, and there's loads of errors, and you're saying, next one that drops a ball, we're down for 10. Well, you're stopping them from learning. So the key thing is that you allow the errors, be aware of it. You have to have those errors in the mental stage, because what's happening is a motor program is being learned by the players. In other words, they're learning how to actually perform the skill, the actual mechanics of performing the skill. Those mechanics haven't been developed yet. If they don't go in the mental stage and make those mistakes, they'll never get them, okay? Your job as a coach in that stage is a huge amount of feedback. You have the highest level of feedback there to help them, because they have not done this before, so they don't know how to self-correct. Moving on to the practice stage, it's the second stage, and players begin to get a bit more of an idea of what's happening here. They're able to spot and fix themselves a little bit more, and what's happening is you withdraw your feedback and you hand the ownership over to the player. Okay, there's less errors in this stage, but still it's taken a huge amount of focus, or the brain has been overloaded still to a great deal in the practice stage. Okay, the third stage then is the automatic stage, and when we're dealing about the automatic stage, this is when something happens and the player doesn't have to think about it. You look at any of your senior club players and someone just hits a ball at him. They'll either put down the hurler, the hand will go out and it'll just go into the hand. They didn't actually have to say, right, get my stance right, get my body position right, get my hand right. Because it's automatic, it just happens. All right? And that's hugely important. Okay? And that's where we want to get our players to, is the automatic stage. If we can get our players to the automatic stage, it means that we have a lot more time to do other things, which we'll speak about later in the, and that's really looking at, say, higher end, again, your 13s, 15s, 17s seniors, okay? So, all right, moving on again then. Okay, 2 very important definitions here, lads, and it's key for what we're doing, is that in the motor learning is the acquisition of a new behavior through skill practice, resulting in a relatively permanent change in the ability of an individual to perform a movement. In other words, the key things here are the ability to perform a movement. All right? So you have the capacity, or the player has the capacity to move in a certain way, whether that be for a high catch, he's able to run, jump, lead with one knee, hand up in the air, hurl up to protect, all that happening in one go. So that's motor learning. Okay? That is very distinct from the next definition, which is skill acquisition. Skill acquisition is the process of skill. The process of skill acquisition is distinct from the execution of the skill, motor control, in that learning is a gradual process that occurs over many performance attempts, resulting in a behavior that is less vulnerable to transitory factors such as fatigue, pressure, intensity, and anxiety. Now, this is where we really come into play. Our motor learning, the previous one, is where we're teaching our kids at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 how to jab lift, get into position, bend your knees, bend your ankle, bend at the ankles, bend at the knees, bend at the hips, get down over the ball. That's all motor programming, getting the body to be able to do it. Skill acquisition, on the other hand, the key things here, it's a gradual process. It's not going to happen overnight. I would look at skills that we've taught the lads are under 7, now they're under 9. they won't have them up to the mastery stage or the probably for 10 years. Okay, and that's important that we're not expecting too much out of them. What will we do as they get better? Now most of them can run and jab lift the ball, but can they do it with fatigue, pressure, intensity, anxiety? We're not going to bring that into number under 7, under 9 really, bar at their level. But when we're working with senior teams, how often do we get the players to perform these skills under fatigue, under pressure, under intensity? All right, anxiety, in other words, 2 lads marking or whatever it is, okay? That's what we need to do, because that's replicating the game-like situations, and that's key to us as learning. If we don't do it in our training sessions, it's not going to happen when we go into a match day. So that's hugely, hugely important, okay? So just keep those in mind. Motor programming and skill acquisition are 2 very different things. Motor programming comes first. When you have the program, now we see, can we get them up to the level of performing these skills in a game scenario? Okay, and we go again then, Dara. Okay, so what's our role as coaches? I start with the first one, creating a learning environment. This is key, this is fundamental. And when I say learning environment, I mean everything you do, even before you get to the field. Have you planned your session? When you go in there, your first interaction with your players, have you your field set up, and as they're coming in, you're meeting them? All right, hugely important. Can you talk to your players about things that's happening in their life? How did your college exams go? How is school going if we're talking with the under 7s? Were you at soccer training last night? It doesn't matter. Create that environment that we want you, we are interested in you, we want to know all about you, right? And that's key. I put in their learning environment as opposed to building rapport, because creating the learning environment means they're there learning. They're not just there to have fun. Fun is hugely important, but they have to be learning something as well. They don't want their 5 years with me and having right fun and huge entertainment, but they've learned no skills of the game. That's not what it's about. So that learning environment is key. Next one then is design the practice environment. So based on my session planner, have I the practice environment set up that I'm able to go from one thing to another? All right. Provide instruction and feedback. All right. So when I'm asking them to do something, am I clear and concise? Am I accurate with my questioning and feedback to them? All right. Do I know what I'm saying, or am I just talking for the sake of talking? Next one then. Demand players move from the comfort zone to the growth zone. If we have players in a comfort zone that might never be dropping the ball and it all looks well to the uncoached eye, all right? But for coaches, we need to demand that the players are making mistakes. We need to see, especially as we get older again, lads, we're going up into teenage years. When we see them doing X, Y, and Z, they need to be out of into a certain miscomfort. You have to take them out of that comfort zone. If you don't, they'll only remain at the level they're at. So mistakes are key in sessions. All right, the next one then, design sessions to maximize transfer. So in other words, how you set up your practice. Are you going to be looking at random practice or blocked practice as your main types of training sessions? Some of you will say, what's the difference? What is a random practice? What is a block practice? I will be dealing with them in the next few minutes. And they're probably one of the biggest things that I've taken when I was planning this one, okay? It's absolutely massive. It's definitely changed my approach to how I'll work, okay? Next one then, player-centered approach. Am I down there to advertise what I know, or am I down there to meet the needs of the players? 100% to meet the needs of the players, okay? A huge amount of that is going back to your coaching philosophy. What do you want nowadays, all right? Again, I go back, if I can have every player running into the field for training and not wanting to leave at the end of it, and you might say, yeah, but that's okay with the 9s. I mean that at senior level as well. You need to get that, right? And that's being player-centered, looking after the player, not being a pushover, definitely not a pushover, but you need to look after, you coach the players first and then you get a team. There's no point in going in and trying to treat them all the same, because they're not all the same. They're all individuals. The next one then is use head, hands, feet. In terms of technical coaching, it's probably the single best thing to use. If you're coaching a skill, make sure those three things. Where's your head at? In other words, where your eyes are. What are you looking at? Where's your hands? Where's your hands in relation to the hurl? Where's your feet? Are the shoulder width apart? Are there weight transferring from one foot to another during this skill, whether it's striking or whatnot? Absolutely godsend from children right up to adults. The head, the hands, the feet. All right? Next one then is moving from closed environment to open environment. We would start hugely with the kids, the younger lads, in a closed environment. So they're doing a row lift all on their own. Okay, nobody's near them. That's a closed environment because nothing changes really. So the row lift again, now do it again, now do it again. If I tried to do that row lift with my seniors, the seniors would be gone a mile. All right? They need an open environment where you have to deal with maybe pressure from 3 other lads and you perform in the row lift. So that's what I mean by that. Moving from an environment where there's no one interfering with what you're doing into an environment where it's really more like match day, okay? Plan for match day skills, not just a technique. And what I mean by that, a technique is your ability to perform the motor program, where the skills is your ability to perform skills on match day. Right, so it's even like the thing you see a player or a coach saying, Janie, they didn't catch a single high ball today, and I wouldn't mind we practiced it for 10 minutes the last day. That's not going to develop. You're talking again long-term things, long-term development of skills. They might practice catching high ball, one at either side of the field. Great, that's the motor programming. But does that replicate the match situation? And most of the time it doesn't. So that's something that we have to be aware as coaches, that we're making sure that even when they're doing drills, the drills are performed at an intensity that replicate the match. Or I would even say I would try to perform the drills at an intensity higher than the match. Okay, and that's what we're trying to do. Okay, go again, Dara. Okay, so practice makes perfect. Okay, Ericsson had this idea of 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to become skill mastery. Now you're talking about world-class mastery in that. So that puts back to us, takes a lot of pressure off me if I'm dealing with a group of 7-year-olds. If he's saying it's going to take 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. So what I'm saying is my time is valuable here to go down there to the hurling field in the evening. I want to make sure that when I am going down, I'm maximising the return of my time. So why go down and do the same thing that was done for me 30 years ago, if there is a better way of doing it? All right, and that's for a second, not for a second belittling what happened. We had brilliant coaches when we were growing up along, and hugely lucky. And the kids there at the moment, every team is really well catered for. So without a shadow of a doubt, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying if there is a better way of doing certain aspects of it, maybe it's a win-win for everybody. So we'll just go through and have a look at them, all right? All right, Dara. Okay, variation is the key to learning, okay? Again, go back to the thing of when you were hurling yourself and you drove into the field and you saw the cones on the ground and you knew exactly what was coming for the next hour and a half. Enough to switch the brain off. You start maybe with 5-6 laps or something like that, and the brain switches off and you're talking about what happened at the weekend and so on like that. There's no bite, no cut or whatever. All right, that kind of idea has to go. So what we're looking at is how do we bring variety in it, or what role does variety actually play in it? And that's what we're going to look at. Okay, Dara? Okay, so practice variability. What is it? First of all, I must say that the first point there is not the repetition of a hurling strike that generates the learning. It has a role in developing the motor learning, but not the skill or the skill acquisition, okay? It's forcing players to adapt his or her technique to meet the different requirements or constraints placed by the coach. In other words, run to the ball, first touch, no ball in the hand, ball goes back. That's a constraint. So if we talk about constraints, is when you put in, all right, 2 seconds with the ball in the hand, you must give it on. That's another constraint. So what we have to do is we have to put different constraints in at different times to keep the players thinking. If we do not have players thinking, we're not learning. They're just in the comfort zone that we talked about previously, and we want to get them out of that. Okay? Third point there, variety will lead to a greater skill transfer and retention. And I'll show you a few studies on that later, okay? Where variety is the key for the learning. It's not the repetition. It's the variety is what leads to transfer. When I'm talking about transfer, I mean, if we're doing an activity down the field, will this transfer to the match they're going to play in 2 weeks' time? That's what I mean by transfer. What I mean by retention is, will they actually remember the skill that they went to do? Will they remember the teaching points? Okay, and that's what we're looking at. So variety is the key to do that. So mental effort is increased, so we're more tuned in as players. You see players tuned in and having to concentrate because they don't know what's happening next. There's huge variety in that. Okay, if they're tuned in like that, that's when they're learning. Okay, that's when they're learning. All right, Dara. Okay, so I just want to I want to show you this in action of the power of the mind, okay? So what I want you all to do is just open up your chat at the side of the computer, okay? So just open up your chat at the side of the computer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give every one of you a maths problem to do, okay? A sum to do. What I want you to do is just write the answer in as quick as you can, okay? As quick as you can get that answer in, I want you to do that, okay? So the first question there, Dara, 37 plus 68. Write the answer in as quick as you can. Cheers, Fergus is good there. Yeah, well done. And anyone coming now is just copying the others anyhow. So look at, well done, lads, well done. That's very good, very good. Okay, right, we all had to think about that. There was a bit of thinking in that. There was a huge amount of thinking in that to get, all right? The next question now I want you to answer, all right? I'm going to give you 4 in a row now. Go, 37 plus 69. Go again, Dara. 37 plus 70, 37 plus 71, 37 plus 72. Okay. From our end here, the answers have rolled in. And there's very little difference in the questions. All right? There's very little difference. Well done, lads, in the questions. But the one you had to work for was the top one. 37 plus 68. You had to think about it. The 37 plus 69 plus 70 plus 71 plus 72, all you did was just added 1 each time. All right? You had already done the mental functioning or the central processing to think of how to do this. All right? Likewise, if we have players just standing, pucking, 1 on 21, 1 on the end line, just pucking nice and dandy, the first 3 or 4 pucks to get the range, to get their eye in, and then they think they're flying it. And yeah, my eye is in now, and that's it, and it takes a few seconds to get your eye in. That's not the case. That's what I thought was the case up to very lately. What is actually happening is, because I'm doing the same thing over and over again, I don't have to think about it. I just keep recalling the last thing I do and replicate that. I might fine tune it, I might do something slightly different, okay? Like that sum, all you done was jump back on the previous questions. So what if we had 3 people moving around the field at different angles, running here, running there, and when you get the ball, you have to give it to the third fella, but you don't know where he's going to be. You don't know the distance you have to strike there. You don't know what direction you're going to strike, left or right. It's all happening as you're running. Okay, now all they're doing is just pucking and moving. The very same nearly as on the end lines, but you're constantly tuned in to where my players are gone, where's my buddies gone, where do I have to pass? And that's just the most simplistic example I'm giving you. This can be for every single activity you do in the field. That to keep the mental side engaged, we have to plan our sessions to make sure that they have to be tuned in, that they can't just be repeating the same thing over and over again, that every single activity that they do is different, okay? And that's key. So I want you to keep that in mind, okay? On we go then. All right, so that was the relevance, okay? So practice variability. When I do that kind of a session, lads, where I am breaking up and down and slowing and so on like that, and players don't know what's happening next and don't know what's happening. What happens for those looking on at the session? It leads to a high level of variability in skill execution. In other words, there's good skill execution, there's poor, and players are mishitting more often than not than if they're standing in the one spot, right? Do I give out as the coach then for that, or do I say this is part and parcel of it? Okay, so there's inconsistent performance outcomes. It's not as good as if I have the lad on the end line and the lad on the 14 and pucking. It's definitely not as good. But what is happening is the that inconsistency is leading to a better transfer of learning. You are actually reaching better retention and better learning outcomes by doing that, as opposed to just sitting back and letting players never make a mistake. So you need to, I suppose, all your sessions, once they have the motor programming, is push it into variability that they have to, and that relies a huge amount on me as the coach. I don't just get to do a drill that I could do for any skill. I have to be constantly thinking, how am I going to change that? All right, Dara. Okay, the next point that I'm putting in on top of the variability is we talk about we have to challenge our players based on what level they're at. And I've always been looking for something, and James Flynn sent it on to me. It's a 15% failure rate is the optimal challenge point for skill acquisition. Okay, in other words, what is he on about now? What I'm on about is if you've players taking 20 shots from different positions, different left, right, running forwards, running backwards, striking left, striking off the hurl, they should be experiencing failure around 3 out of 20. If you go much below that 3, 5 is okay. If you go much below that 3 out of 20, players are going to find it too hard and lose motivation. If you make it too easy, they just go through the motion. In other words, bring it back to block practice where they don't have to think. So making sure that you have a session where your players, by and large, are making mistakes is important. But keep your failure rate around 15%, okay? And that's a study that was done in college in America, okay? So it's key to 15% failure rate. And that's why I'd always say the 3 out of 20 is what you're looking at, okay? All right, moving on then. Okay, so what is block practice? Block practice involves practicing one skill continuously in isolation for a set of attempts. Okay, the jab lift on its own, just a picture there. That is practiced in every field in Ireland without fail. Okay, you might say, but are you asking me to move away from that? I'm not. That is good for learning the technique of the jab lift on its own. That's what it's for. But that's your motor learning. The block practice is your motor learning, where the random practice is your skill acquisition. So random practice involves alternating between 2 or more skills at each attempt, e.g. jab, lift, solo, strike, all practiced together in a variety. You're not doing the same jab, solo, strike, one after the other. They're all changing. You're constantly changing the length, the height, and so on. Whatever variability or constraint you put in as the coach. That is where we learn match games in random practice, excuse me. Okay, Dara. Right, just on this, lads, just before Dara plays this video, this is my young lad at home, and it's brilliant to see. Brilliant. I probably use him as a lab rat in ways, but he loves his hurling. He loves being out. I'd never ask him to pick up a hurl and go hurl with me. Never would. It's always the other way around. But what I want you to say about these videos, there were no edits and there were no takes. So you'll see warts and all here. And that's hugely important for you, the learner, to see that these are as they happened, okay? What I'm trying to show you here is block practice in isolation. So an activity that's been happening where the kid is, in this stage, he's 7 years of age. He's doing the jab lift in this video. What I want you to look at in this, for you to coach, and put on your coaching cap for this, technique. What was his technique like? And do you think he got 30 seconds? What was he concerned about? Was it about the number of reps he do in the 30 seconds, or making sure he got good technique? That's one question. And the other question I'm going to ask you before we watch it is, how close to the reality of the game is what he's just done? Okay? Play it then. Or Dara, come on.
Okay, stop.
Okay, so just from my point of view, yeah, great for motor learning to learn the actual movements that's required for that activity. There's no problem with that. I have zero issue with that. We're doing that with our 7s and our 9s. We're doing that, but we're aware that it's only meeting the current need to get them to be able to do that, physically have the wherewithal to do that. It's not replicating match day scenario. That is not replicating match scenario. So if I go away from my under 7 session and then complain about it next time they were out playing, or under 9 session, the next playing, not one of them jab lift the ball right, and I wouldn't mind where I spend 3 weeks ahead. That does not teach them to jab lift the ball in a game scenario. That does not. And that's huge that I'm aware of that as a coach, and that we're making you aware of that as a coach, because that will teach them the movement, but not the skill acquisition. And we've talked about the difference between that. All right. So some aspects are good. He wasn't concerned about his technique there. He was concerned about jabbing the ball and into the hand the number of times in 30 seconds. So sometimes we all do it. We all do it. I do it. It has its place, but what it is, make sure you're aware of its limits as well, okay? And that's the point that I want you to take from that. Okay, go on again, Dara. Okay, the next one then, lads, is what we're looking at, and the next one is block practice and game based. So this is the very same thing. We're teaching them the same skill over and over again. But what we've done now, we've progressed to a game scenario to make it more like what he might be doing in a game. Still, we're concerned with him learning the motor program, not skill acquisition, the motor program, okay? We're still looking at that. So if you play it there, Dara.
All right, Danny, for this activity, okay, just wait here. What you have to do is jab lift the slithers, okay? We're working jab lift still. But then you must put it in your hand, run the 4 steps, no solo. Run the 4 steps and leave it at the far orange, or then run back, jab lift, and at the near orange, okay? So what are we looking at? The important things, hands on the hurl, all right? Where do you bend? What do you bend? No, knees and hips. Okay, good man. All right. Where's your eyes? All right. And when you're jab lifting, your foot is alongside. Okay, good man. So you're running that pace at it. Okay. So hold on there, and I'll move up so you just get a better view for the coaches. Okay, away you go, Danny. Okay, that's okay. Back to the cone. Back to the cone. Go again. Keep going. All right, hold it there, Danny. Okay, Danny, this time I want you to hurl down a little bit earlier when you're doing it. Okay? I'll just show you what I mean, okay? All right? So the hurl down a little bit earlier. So as you're coming to the ball, your hurl is down. And into the hand, okay? You're not coming in like this, look. And then putting the hurl down. Your hurl is down earlier. Good man. Okay, where you go? That's it. That's good. Hurl down nice and early. That's okay. Back you go again. Good man. That's good. Good man. 4 steps. That's it. Good man. Brilliant. Well done. Well done. Okay, come to the camera here, Danny. Okay, which is better fun? That one or standing in the one position where you're jab lifting? Why? Easier. Why was it easier? Because you were what? Running. Good man, good man, good man. And what else? Was it more? Which was more like a game? Why?
Because you're trying to get all the balls. The other one, all you're trying to do is just lift his foot on you. It's like so. It's like a game where someone can win, like someone goes back and someone puts it on. And it's like rocking this, basically.
Good man. Good man. Thanks, Danny.
All right, folks, just on that one then. Okay, just 4 little things that came up in that. The first of all, the coaching in it, okay? He was asked head, hands, feet, and we nailed them in the beginning. And that's what I'm talking about, getting that into it. Any activity I get my young lads doing, well, that's the key to it, is head, hands, feet, that you're constantly replicated on that. Okay, spotting and fixing about his hurl down early as opposed to just putting it down last second, which breaks his stride and he'd probably have to stop. Okay, then the other one, a major thing that we need to be doing with our players is questioning. Rather than telling Danny all the answers there as a coach, I try question, okay? And this is good practice for all of us, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is develop our players when they get to a certain age, 18, 19, 20, and that they're thinking for themselves. Well, if they're used to us at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of age being asked questions, they have to think of why they did what they did. Okay, and that's key for us as coaches to keep that in mind. Have 3 or 4 questions ready for tonight's session, and they're never too young to question. Okay, moving on then, Dara. Okay, the next one then, we're moving from block practice to random practice, where this time there's increase in decisions and he's to decide what to do. So you might as well roll it there, Dara.
Next activity, Danny, we're going to mix up the roll lift and the jab lift. Okay, there's 6 balls in the square. You have to decide whether to roll lift or jab lift. The only difference is, if you're rising a ball, you can't put it out over the square till it gets into your hand, okay? All right? So you have to decide what you're going to do when you come to the different balls, okay? The roll lift, every time you roll lift the ball, you must go back to the cone you came from. Jab lift, you can follow through and go to the next cone. Is that okay? All right? So do you want to go back up to the top there and start? Get ready to start. So don't forget your head. What are you looking at? Your hands under what position? Yeah, good man, ready position. And then your feet, 1 foot as well, alongside the ball, okay? So just remember on that. Okay, Danny? Yeah? Right here, why? What happened? Right, so what would you do instead? Roll lift, good man, that's good. Okay, away we go. That's good. That's good. Okay, that's okay. That's nothing wrong with that, good man. Okay, and again, folks, when we're looking at that, what we just see is that it is okay to make a mistake. A mistake is no issue at all. But what we have is, it's more game-based, okay? And that's key. Just putting a little bit of challenges. Not just keeping our challenges as static. We're trying to link it back to games-based coaching. This is the simplest format of that, okay? That's what we're looking at. Again, in that, we've moved away from a bit of, I suppose, block practice to a bit of random practice, okay? Which a lot of this presentation is looking at. And we know performance mightn't be as good, but retention probably will be, and learning will transfer better to a game situation. What we're going to look at now is, we're going to look a little bit more, I suppose, at block and transfer, okay? So bear with me now for a minute and we get set up for the next.
All right, Derek, move on then again. Okay, so folks, I mentioned earlier about the acquisition, retention and transfer of a skill. Basically what happened here was any study, there's any amount of studies out there, this is just one, okay, by Shane Morgan, okay, and what it was the timing to do a particular activity with their hands, okay? So the lower the time, the better, the more skilled the individual was. So what happened was block practice. In other words, the lads in the red practiced the same thing over and over and over again. No change in environment, no change in anything. And as you can see, they improved to a more of a degree than the green lads. The green team or the green individuals, what they did, they practiced, but they changed up the type of practice consistently till we came to 6 repetitions of it. After that, they were stopped. They came back the following week, and the time that it took the lads that done block practice had gone back up to 2.2 seconds, where the time for those that done the random practice had gone down below 1.4 seconds. So the transfer and the retention has improved from performing random practice. And that's your take-home message for this. If I want my players to learn to transfer skills to a game setting and retain what we're doing with them. In other words, making most use of my time and their time and parents' time, we need to be using random practice. And that's all the way up to senior inter-county. That's a elite world-class sport. Random practice helps the acquisition, the retention and the transfer of skill. This is one of any amount of studies. All right, it makes no difference what study, every single one of them is coming back that random practice is the key. Okay, moving on again then. Okay, so block practice then, what is it? What happens if I run a block practice in my field session? Well, what I'll see is better performance of skills in the short term. So when I go down the field and lads looking on and say, Jesus, Damien has the lads flying, and look at them lads and they're all able to do this. Over the long term, though, learning isn't as permanent. They'll forget a lot of what they've done because all I'm doing is getting them to repeat the same thing. And what happens, do we say? The brain switches off because they've already learned it. Very same as when you've done your maths question. All right? When you're being challenged with different types of questions, you're learning more. The random practice then improves retention or learning of a skill. But what does it mean for us coaches? Well, it depends on the current player's ability. If the player is only learning a new skill, they have to do a certain amount of blocked practice to learn the motor learning. But if we're looking at developing a hint of skill acquisition and the needs of the game long term, we need to move towards random practice. All right? Okay, next one then. Okay, so look at what we're looking at here. We're going to give you an example of, this was the high catch, that's what he did. Again, probably tough enough for a lad of his age, but looking at, can he, if we do block practice first, you'll see the good performance. Why? Because it's nearly the same movement over and over again. When we progress on, what we're looking at is into random practice, the transfer will be good, but what's happened is performance levels drop. So other people might look and say, geez, he's not as good as he had been, he's after losing more. But that's because there's more random practice. The video nearly explains probably better than I'm doing at the moment. Just 3 things I want you to look out for yourselves as a coach, okay? I want you to see the very obvious difference in blocked and random practice as one. The second thing, what I want you to do is I want you to look at the use of imagery when coaching this age group. I think I mentioned something like he jumped out and he got the ball. I said the big bear claw on him or something like that. Creating that image is hugely important. Like one of the things we'd look at doing is imagery the whole time, that they're the Henry Shefflins, the TJ Reeds, the Joe Cannings, the Shamie Callanans. That's what we're looking at doing on a regular basis, okay? That imagery is hugely important, okay? The next one then is questioning to make thinking players. So we'll roll it there and we'll have a quick look at it, okay? All right, Dara?
All right, folks, Danny's set up there in front of the goal here. What we're looking at is, we're looking a bit on, again, block practice for that age, repeating the activity over and over again, developing the motor coordination. But once that's developed, we'll try to progress it on a bit. What we're going to look at is it's a challenging enough one that probably not enough coaching is actually put into it. So what we're going to do is, I'm just going to gently tap a high ball and Danny's going to catch it, okay? Or going to attempt to catch it. Again, when we're looking at, where's your eyes, Danny? On the ball, okay? How do your hands go up, Danny? Yeah, good man. So hands up. So your hurl goes from the ready position in the front, up over your head, and then a gap between your hand and a hurl. Okay? So he's only definitely in the mental stage of learning this, mental to practice stage of learning this skill. He's only added maybe the last 4 or 5 weeks of really, as opposed to just fun games, throwing and catching, which are hugely important. But those fun games have provided the prior learning that has really helped him develop the skill. So he's been at, say, fundamental or nursery, active start club is what we do in the club. He's at that since he was probably a year old, because I was involved with it. So it was easy to bring him down. But we do a lot of throwing and catching and activities like that for no other reason other than fun down there. But what I do notice is how much it has benefited him in catching the high ball, okay? So we're just going to put a few up, and they're going to be blocked practice. So don't anyone ever tell you block practice isn't important. It's definitely important at this young age, okay? Where they're developing the motor programming to catch that ball. Okay, Danny, you right? Good man. You want to put 4 up here, okay? That was my fault. Good man, good control. Good man. Next one then, Dan. Next one. I have another one here. Ready? Good catch. Well done. Big bear claw on you. Good man. Good man. There's the last one. Well done. Well done. That was a good attempt. Okay, Danny. Okay. It's okay. What happened the first time that you didn't catch one? Hit your palm. What does that tell me? What should have hit? Your fingers, just above your palm, isn't it? All right. Okay. Now, if that really identifies to me that the player is in the practice stage rather than the mental stage of this activity, because a quick question from the coach, and he was able to tell me what happened wrong. So that shows a thinking player, a player that's thinking about his game. And that's hugely important. That's where we need to get our players from. I've often been asked on coaching courses, at what stage do you question players? I question players from nursery, from 4, 5, 6, what age appropriate, okay? And that's important, okay? So we're going to do just 5 more random or block practice and we'll see how we get on, okay? Okay, Danny, you ready? Good. Ready? Good. That's good technique, Danny. Very good hand. Oh. That's okay, Danny. Next again, Danny. Well done, well done, well done. What happened there, Danny? Hit your palm. Okay, very good. So you can see, Danny, there, what he's concerned in is catching the ball and getting 3 out of 5. And he's looking then next time I want to get 4. As a coach, I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned that does he know why he didn't catch the 2? All right? And if he knows that, it's just a quick informal. Well, Danny, but well done. Why he didn't catch it? Once he knows that, I can move on. I don't need to spend loads of time there because he showed me his practice rate is fairly high, okay? We talk about when we're setting a difficulty in training, and we'll talk about that in the presentation, a practice variability or a challenge point of 15%. So in other words, if players experience 15% failure, as seen as an adequate point in order to keep motivation high enough, but to make the task challenging enough, okay? That's block practice. But all I want for Danny is to learn the hand. I'm going to progress it on, and this might be too hard for Danny. It shouldn't be too hard for him, okay? So, Danny, don't mind if you make a mistake of this. This is for the coaches, okay? So, we're moving away from just doing the simple thing. We're working on first touch, okay? We're working on controlling the ball wherever way it's coming to you. So, you're just coming at that ball, you're controlling it, and just giving it back to me. Okay, go. Good habits. Good man. Okay, straight away, do you see what happened as a coach? Okay, I'm just going to block it there, right? What went out the window was the hurl to protect the hand went straight out the window because he's not at the automatic stage of that. So by me varying up the activity that he was asked to do, his technique of the previous skill reduced. When we were allowing him the same ball over and over again as in a blocked format, he was able to catch that ball every single time. Okay? Or he had the right technique to catch it. The minute we went away from him knowing what was coming next, which is practice variability, his technique dropped. So what that tells me as a coach, he's probably not 100% ready, as I thought, for that. And that's important to know, because there's no point in me really upsetting the apple cart with him in terms of, but because he's done well on the high catch the other way, I would bring a bit of this in and we could ask him a few questions. What did you do right? What did you do wrong? Okay, again, question him. Okay, Danny, last one. Whichever way it comes. Good catch, good claw, right finger. That's it. That's it. Okay, again, he forgot his hurl because he doesn't know what way the ball is coming. Doesn't know what way the ball is coming. All right, back again, Danny. I have another one. All right, what happened? We need to get into when that low ball is coming. Run into it. Good man. All right, and we just do one more shot. Good man. So he's thinking there last minute to get the hurl up. He led with the hand and then realised he should have the hurl as well. So good stuff, Danny. Well done.
All right, lads. I think the video sort of self-explains it, but I think it was just the way it happened. All right, it wasn't planned that he'd forget the technique or anything like that. But it's the real point that I'm telling you. Once we moved to random practice, the transfer wasn't as good. Okay, when he was stuck in block practice, he was getting good performance, and that's okay. That's good for that age or any age when they're learning a new skill, because confidence is one of the key things for skills as well. So by doing block practice, you can get confidence up, but don't stay there. Do not stay there, because it will not help you when it comes to match scenarios. You have to bring it across to match scenarios. Moving on then, Dara. Okay, so what is the role of games in terms of skill acquisition? So players tend to be more tuned in games rather than just doing drills, okay? Because a game by its nature has a winner and a loser, or a chance to win. So that in itself creates a competitive animal in us all. Don't let anyone ever tell you, like I might talk about our aim isn't to win 110. Don't get it. We go out and they'll try their damnedest. Those lads will try their damnedest to try win every game they play, and they don't go out and say, I don't mind if we don't win. But it's not the value that we care about, or it's not the overall thing. It's competitive by its nature. That's why games keep players tuned in. Second one then, a lot more variability in the execution of skill, because there's so many things happening at the one time in a game scenario. And that's what makes it brilliant for creating variability or random practice. Okay, condition to add constraints. So you can decide if you're working on a high catch, like say the last one, we want to bring that to a game. Well, the first thing is, how do I get more high catches? So simple things. How would I get more high catches? Well, eliminate ground hurling. Eliminate maybe batting the ball. You can only catch a ball. So there's two very simple things. Eliminate hand pass. So the ball has to be struck out of hand. Okay. So that again plays a role in it. Okay. Next one then. Can highlight when skills is limiting factor to the game being successful. So if you're doing the high catch, or you're doing, say, a game, whatever it is, and the game is falling down based on a single skill, well, you'd say, well, they're not ready to perform that in a game setting. We need to bring it back a step to a lesser activity in order for that to happen. Okay. The last one, or the last two then, coach can identify where players are in terms of skill acquisition. If you have a player and he's performing the techniques correctly in a game scenario, that player more than likely knows that skill. So under the pressure of a game, if they're still performing the skill correctly, that's a good indicator for me as a coach of what level they're at. The last one then, practice a lot more random, okay? So it's not blocked, it's random, because we don't know what's going to happen next. Okay, moving on then again. Okay, so when we're talking about skill and learning a skill, this diagram came from I think Dave Goldsmith had an article or something in the AFL, and I just changed it around to make it use for GA setting. And what we're looking at is, when does a technique, in other words, when does the motor programming become actually a skill? In other words, skill acquisition. So the first thing that we do is to learn to perform the technique. That's the motor programming. There's your block practice. Okay. Then can we get that very well, that they're getting it right the majority of the time? Can we get it right? Now we're adding in speed. And that first line is probably your 7s, your 9s, and maybe even into your 11s for all your skills. Okay? The next line then, can we perform very well at speed and under fatigue? Under fatigue, next one then, and under pressure. So adding in players. And then consistently, that we're doing it right over and over again. And then games based. Can we do all that correctly at a high intensity with pressure on, and do it consistently in a game scenario. Well, if that's happening, and we're talking probably 13s, 15s, 17s, that's skill mastery when they're able to do that on a regular basis. So this idea of doing jab lifting for 10 minutes, and now we've taught the jab lift, it's a phantom. We need to be looking at long-term player development over 10 plus years, okay? And they don't stop developing when they hit 17, okay? So think of that as it takes pressure off you as a coach as well. Okay, moving on then. Okay, so what's an open and closed skill? I'm not going to spend much time on this because I've mentioned it already. An open skill, a skill that is affected by the environment. The player must make decisions based on what's happening around them, right? They probably never were in that scenario before, that Tipperary player, okay? He's to decide what's happening because he's been in loads of scenarios like it. At the other end, you have Joe Canning lining up for a free. The environment is very predictable. You know what's happening. It's a closed environment. That's where we start with our skills and we progress on to an open environment as we move on. Okay, moving on again then. Okay, this is huge, lads, in terms of getting skill level up. This is skill triangle, okay? And we're looking at the do part of the skill is the motor program. That's the motor program, the do part of the skill. Can you do it? Have you the ability to do it? But there's a lot more to mastering a skill or to being able to perform a skill than just doing it. It's number one is reading the scenario, what's happening on the field of play in front of me now, planning what I'm going to do, and then just going and doing it. So there's three parts to it. The more proficient and skilled your players are at the do part, the more attention. All right? The more attention that they'll have. All right, the problem with PowerPoint is there's a PowerPoint. I see someone saying a power problem with that. We'll look at it again. We'll look at it again, okay? So what we're looking at is we want to make sure that the skill is so automatic with all our players when we're hitting 17 that they have plenty of time to look at the read and the plan aspects of it, okay? If the players master the skill, the do, more external focus is available for plan and read, okay? Where you see underage, if they're running out the ball, under 7, under 9 to do a jab lift, all their attention is down on that ball coming at him, every focus to get the ball in their hand, and now all of a sudden they look up. What? I'm reading, I'm planning, and then they decide what they're going to do. If you go up to elite level, they're just looking before the ball comes in, last minute, back to the ball, flick to the hand, and they've already decided what they're going to do if the skill level is high enough. And that's what we need to do. We need to start designing, especially with our teenagers and so on, sessions and skill practices that make them read and make them plan. They're not just straight line activities. They have to decide on what's going to happen in real time. And that's where our game base come in again. Okay? All right, so on we go again. Okay, so don't forget to coach. This is the last video, lads. This is the last video that I'm going to put up. I'll just let it's looking at random practice, okay, and it's making decisions. So this is like the coaching triangle for under 7s. So he is the plan, he's the read, he is the plan, and then do the thing, okay. Just in case it's not clear for you, I had 5 or 6 slitters on the ground. I had 4 cones, each cone a different colour. I held up a cone and it was a certain task, and then he had to go do it. So basically he ran back to that white cone is in front of the goal, out jab lift the ball or roll lift the ball, entirely up to him. And when I held up a cone just as he was jab lifting, so he had to look up at me then and decide what he was going to do. So the skill that I was teaching was the jab lift. If he's doing that jab lift right while concentrating on next things too, that's a huge progression than just standing and jab lifting. Okay, I'll roll it there then. Sarah?
Okay, folks, what we're looking at here is just a little game to work with the triangle from the presentation of the skill triangle, where we have do, where we have plan, and we have read in that order, okay? Well, let's really start at the bottom. Read, you plan, and you do. Right, Danny's very young for this kind of a an idea, okay, very young for it, okay? But you can still introduce the idea that it's not just simple block practice out to the ball rising over the bar and the player just goes through the motions because they're doing the same thing over and over again. What I'm wanting you to concentrate on as coaches is just look at Danny and the level of concentration that goes into him when he doesn't know what activity is coming next. So we have a blue cone. What does a blue cone mean, Danny? Hand pass to me. White cone. Stick it in the net. I think so, Danny. Red cone, whip on it. An orange cone. Over the bar. That's brilliant, okay? So Danny has to go back to the cone every time and start his run from there. Okay, go, Danny. Okay, well done, Danny, well done.
Okay, folks, so look at all I wanted you to get out of that to see there was that you're making the player think, and this kind of stuff, we don't do it enough for this age group. But if they get in the habit of having to be constantly thinking when you're hurling is the very same as when you're 17 or 7. But if they're doing it from 7, look at the 10 years practice in that. We don't wait till they get to 15, 16, 17 to start getting them to do activities that require a lot of thought. Start pushing the boundaries out. You'll know fairly quick what level they're at, okay? Moving on then. Right, so in conclusion, just to wrap up the whole thing, when we're coaching, lads, keep this for yourself. This has got me out of more I suppose, traffic jams than a lot, is using head, hands, feet. Where's your head? Where's your hands? Where are your feet? At a training session, I probably use it 15, 20 times when I'm going around to all the kids. Teach the skill through an activity or a game. Don't keep them at the block practice in isolation for too long. Grand to learn the motor program, but then devise a game to get them active in the game. Bring the skill from an open or from a closed environment to open. So start increase the variabilities that you're adding in as you go along, okay? Remember, read, plan, do. Not just how, but when to. And that's one of the biggest key things you look at top players. They seem to do the right thing most of the time. But imagine if we can start our players at 6, 7, 8, and they're being asked to do that, and they're being questioned on why did they do that. All right, that's hugely advantageous as we're going forward as a club. Okay, huge variety then can be added when looking at the 7 stages of skill mastery. So that slide that we've done the 7 different stages. If you're looking at, right, how do I jizz up the jab lift anymore? Well, how do I add pressure? How do I add fatigue? How do I add speed? They're all different ways of just adding to the same skill you're doing, and just by adding a bit. Okay. Progress from block practice to random practice. Block practice, good for motor learning. Random practice for your retention and your transfer learning. Hugely important. Right, Dara? Keep players challenged, and we talked about the 15%. Right? Again, in one session, you'll have players on a different level. I know with ours, we had 7s, 6s, and 5s. And what we used to do was, Richie Flynn used to be with me, and what we do is we'd break up the sessions into 7, 6, and 5 based on ages, really. But within that, you would still have varying ability levels. And cater for that. It goes back to what I said at the beginning, the individuality and being realistic. They're not all going to get it, and that's okay. So keeping them focused, in other words, how well have you prepared your session? All right? Does it meet their needs? Are they excited about it? All right, and then in final then, I moved on then that. Okay, as great quote came across, I'm looking for something to finish it up with. The only thing that interferes with my learning is my education. And you, the coaches, like myself, we are all the educators when it comes to the hurling field. So that's what interferes with their learning, is how we educate. So it's a huge onus on us to try to get the thing right, a massive onus on us. And look make all the mistakes in the world, but make them in the right spirit. Make them because you're trying to do the right thing. If they see us making mistakes trying to do the right thing, we've demystified the whole thing of getting things wrong. Our lads, without fail, we'd often ask them the question, what do mistakes do? Help us learn is the answer we get back. All right? If they're doing that at 7, right, there's no fear of making those errors. What are they going to do now? To show a huge amount of trust to us now. Why do they trust us? Because they know we're there to help them. We know if they get it wrong, we're not going to ridicule them. And that is key to us as coaches. Have we the learning environment that they're willing to do all that in? And that is absolutely, absolutely kernel part of what our job is, okay? So look I hope, lads, you've got something from it. The big thing that I will say to you is, look, we're all back in the pitches. We're all back in the pictures over the next probably few weeks. And the thing is, try to throw some of this in. Try it. Like, I'm going to be trying it. I'm going to make bags of it more evenings than not, but that's okay. But go try it. Like, it's strange times for the last few months, and hope to God now we'll be getting out the other side of it. And it'd be great if we could go and say, right, let's try the block practice and progress in a block practice onto random. All right, and there's little things like that. I don't have all the answers. I don't have anywhere near all the answers. I'm trying to learn the whole time to make it more advantageous to the kids. So look, if anyone has any questions for me, lads, just shout away and we'll do our best. All right. I see Niall has a question there. Block practice. Yeah. If I was looking at block practice, what age group, Niall? If I was doing block practice for any group, I would be having lads floating, none of this standing under 9s, right? I'd have lads that they would not stand on the end line in 21 or 21. We're starting maybe there. All right, lads, now you can go move. Okay, now we can go move. I'll be looking at, we're not just striking dominant side, we're not striking standing, we're striking running, we're striking jogging, we're striking sprinting. It might be the coach just says left, right, left, whatever it is. That is constantly different the whole time. I have them striking going forward, I have them striking going backwards, that I'm constantly changing it up. Maybe I have a rotation in it, right? First strike is going forward, second strike is going backwards, and so on like that. That you're constantly trying to vary, that they're having to think of the new activity the whole time. I hope that helps you, Niall. Any other questions, lads?
Just Damien there, that was a fabulous presentation. You're bringing it to a new level. Question I had now, just while the rest of them are putting questions there, we spoke before about fundamental movement skills, and obviously Danny is on his pathway there because you're getting him to bend the knees and the hips to get to the ball. Where does that, and he's probably, just at the edge of random versus block practice. An age group, does that influence his fundamental movement skills? Does that influence when you can move on to random practice?
The fundamental movement skills is a good question, because it's probably one of the things that he was weak at and has struggled a huge amount with. Anything that he did there, striking a ball or anything like that, did not come from say, just having great fundamental movement skills. It would be a lot of time and effort that he's put into it. But one of the things, he started doing gymnastics, and it's been a huge help for him, and it has brought him on a huge amount. In terms of the fundamentals are key, I don't believe in stopping the fundamentals. You're just progressing them. Probably you're calling them athletic development as they get older, because the 11s, 13s, they don't want to be doing fundamentals. But I see a part for them the whole way right up to adult senior. The fundamentals never wash over though. Is that what you're asking, Daria?
Yeah, and does it, if you say Danny was slightly behind, does that hinder his progression onto the random skill?
It does, but then again, it comes back to the individuality, is because it probably looks at the amount of hours he spent at it. For times there, he might go maybe 3-4 weeks and never leave a hurl down out of his hand. So he's putting a lot of time into it himself, again, a wall and so on like that. So I think that's a lot of it, as opposed to just the age. it all happens at a different age for different individuals, and that's the thing for us as coaches. We have to be so flexible for that. I know when we might start, say the Wimbledon go on, he'd want to play tennis, or if the Champions League is on or the Premiership is on, and hopefully Liverpool will win the league this year, he's mad into anything to do with soccer when that's going on, and that's okay. And it's something that I would say to all the coaches before lads all leave or whatever is, do not be worried about your kid at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 wanting to do other sports. Let them at it, because it's a more rounded education. It's called sampling, but it's a more rounded education they're getting in terms of, and they're covering more the fundamental movement skills, because there are different movement patterns that are present in different games, I suppose. So the more they do that, they're actually getting more of the movement patterns there. All right?
Right, thanks. Emmeline has a question there. Any ideas for a 7-year-old to change hands? He's our son, and he's hurling with the wrong hand.
How are you, Emmeline? I suppose the big thing is how ingrained. You have to look at what you're asking them to happen, or what you're asking him to do now. He's probably at a level now that he's striking the ball better off the wrong side than he is doing it the right way. So you're asking a 7-year-old kid to neglect that. What I would be looking at is, and would have had the issue with Danny, and it's probably the thing that I would say from the very beginning, is that every time he picked up the hurl, that was the first thing that we looked at. Oh, it's the hurl going up, and it's the first thing that we do. We're doing it for 3 years down the field, and we still have kids doing it the wrong way. And all we're doing is going around, change hands. And what I would say to you, if you can get them before they hit mastery, because once they hit mastery, it's so much more difficult to get it done, Emily. And what I would say is to you, is that the king, consistency from all coaches. That's what it is. There's no, I don't have a magic wand. There's no one has that. It's just trying to explain to him and show him, and it's very hard to explain to a 7-year-old to do something that makes him worse at a skill. But what I would be looking at, and that's the reality of it, because what's in it for me? All right, I see Seamus there talking about the small hurls, the little small ones, or a tennis racket is another one. Again, just to get the hand action on it. All right. Francis, another good one, putting the wristband on, so they have to keep the hurl in that hand. Again, lads, the big thing is consistent. All right. Any other questions, lads?
We're getting great feedback, Damien. Now, some brilliant, Damien. Thanks for all. We've got a few questions there. Now, as I said, you've brought this onto a new level, and I'm sure people are going away thinking of the next session they're going to be in, and how they're going to incorporate what you said is what all these webinars are about. So thanks very much for your contribution.
Yeah, no, that's great. Not at all. Listen, again, the key thing is not to be afraid to make the mistake as coaches. Because we're asking our players to do that, we have to be willing to do the same thing ourselves as coaches, not to stay in our comfort zone. If we're looking for them to go to their growth zone, we have to be willing to do the same ourselves. All right?
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Damien. We'll wrap it up.
Lads.
Just like to thanks everyone for tuning in tonight. We're getting great reaction there on the text box, but this is one of the last workshops we're doing in June anyway. So this and the June workshops and webinars will be available. The videos will be available at the end of the month. We'll send it on out. But again, thanks, Damien, for your time, and thanks
no bother.
for tuning in. Good night, all. Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Perfect.